I am taking a TED class at the Miami Valley School, and this is my second video, and our assignment was to respond to one of the many TED videos that we've already watched in class, and I decided to respond to Brene Brown's video, The Power of Vulnerability. And I didn't want to just preach about vulnerability. I kind of wanted to take that and use it in the direction I wanted to go and be more vulnerable in my video to set an example instead of just talking about it, because I am not a vulnerable person. I think that's because I tie vulnerability with trusting people, because if you are vulnerable with someone, you're literally giving them the power over you and trusting them not to screw you over, and that is where I back away, I guess. I'm now finally realizing that this is actually a problem, and it kind of was a slap in the face, but in a good way, when I watched Brene Brown's video, because I realized how important vulnerability truly is. I've never needed to be vulnerable before. If you just focus on them and you don't open up, people are usually happy with that because it gives them more time for themselves. But I'm seeing as I get older and I'm getting new relationships that people demand a certain amount of vulnerability from you. And without that certain amount, you're not able to become close. And this has been really hard for me because I'm not used to it. And so I really wish I would have earlier how important it was, because the longer you wait to open up, the harder it is. And I'm still really bad at being vulnerable and really bad at opening up. And I realize that it's something I need to work on, because you really can't have true relationships with people until you become vulnerable. And you can't always make the person jump through hoops to become vulnerable for them. Sometimes you just need to open up without them doing anything, and sometimes you need to be the first one to open up. And I think the foundation of where I'm coming from is just all insecurities and just me not being comfortable with myself. And an example of that would be, before the assignment was even mentioned or brought up, after I posted my first video, I had already started planning my second video, and it was going to be titled, I Was Wrong, because after watching what I put on my first video, even though so many people agreed with me, I just felt so uncomfortable. So my topic was going to just counter every point that I made. So my point that I made went along the lines of, everyone should just say what's in their heads and say what they're feeling and just talk and talk, because I feel like that will naturally boil it down to saying just what you truly mean. My video, I think, would be better if I actually followed my own advice, because I actually filter a lot of what I say, and there was an aspect of being truthful and being vulnerable and saying everything you wanted that I wasn't getting. And so I kind of dug deeper and found that people are so uncomfortable with silence that they'll just say random stuff that really doesn't mean anything. And I was thinking about this and I'm like, oh cool, this actually does tie into vulnerability, because when there's a silence, people feel vulnerable because they feel like they need to be filling up that silence with something. And that's just a dumb thought. Like, who made silence uncomfortable? Silence is what's natural. Silence is peace. Like, I have no problem with just sitting next to someone, not even saying hi to them, and just like sitting there, like not talking. And I'm fine with that, because I feel like that's natural. And I mean, I don't really like talking and talking and talking. So not only do you need to be vulnerable in the way that you have to be comfortable with anything that you want to say and saying what you're feeling, but you have to be vulnerable enough to be able to sit there in silence and say nothing. People get freaked out by that, because on one side of the spectrum, they're afraid of saying all their feelings because they don't want to be vulnerable. But that is often outnumbered by the amount of pressure we have to fill the silence and just lying to ourselves that saying something that's fake is better than saying nothing at all. And I know this because I put an extreme amount of pressure on myself as well. I have this saying that I think I made up, I don't really know. I would rather say nothing than say nothing. And what that means is I would rather say nothing, which is just sitting there in silence, than say nothing, which is, oh, I agree with everything she said because of all the reasons that she already said, and I think how everyone else thinks, and stuff that really boils down to nothing. I would rather sit there and be silent than spew out words that mean nothing and that add nothing to the conversation. And that's what I say in my head a lot. And that is so much pressure to put on someone. Like, saying that out loud, I realize that that's so unhealthy because I watch so closely everything that I say, well, I try to, and that is what makes me so insecure. I just need to be free with what I say, and I know I'm probably not the only one who thinks that. So that's what I need to work on individually, but I think what we all need to work on is just are comfortable with saying nothing. Just want people to not be afraid of silence, and I think it's actually healthy to be comfortable. If you're comfortable with yourself, you should be comfortable with silence. I think it's all tied into securities, and maybe that when we understand everyone and we see that everyone needs to work on something, then that is when we can be vulnerable. When we understand that no one really likes being vulnerable. So that's something. Even after the video saying vulnerability fosters all human relationships, I still don't want to be vulnerable because it's awful. I guess what I need to realize, and what the majority of everyone in the world needs to realize, is that you need to get through the hard stuff, you need to get through the uncomfortable stuff to get to the good and the genuine and the real stuff, or the relationships with people. You're not gonna get something that's worth it by faking it and by being superficial with that person. You need to actually get to know them and let them get to know you to discover something real and something worth your time. And you have the potential to form these types of relationships with everyone, not just the selected few that you decide to be open with. We need to choose to be vulnerable in every situation we get because we don't know the potential that situation has. And that is the hardest thing that I'm working to come to terms with, because the idea of opening up to a stranger is terrifying because that gives them the opportunity to hurt you a lot. But it's something that's necessary for human relationships, and it's something that's necessary because that type of experience is what teaches you how to love and how to cherish the special things. But I just don't want to do it still.